welcome everybody. It's time once again for the next chapter with Charlie Hedges as he explores turning the page on his life and yours. Hey, Charlie.
Hey, Paul. Our guest today, Pat Wetzel, is a blogger, a soaring pilot, which I will explain, and an award-winning author of a new book titled Bump in the Road. And oh, by the way, Pat happens to also hold a degree from the Wharton Business School in finance. Now, it was almost 2 years ago that Pat and I did a show on soaring, which means flying an airplane solo with no engine. In other words, gliding. Pat is an avid soarer and much, much more. And since that show, she and I have become dear friends. Pat is engaging and a very curious conversationalist, which makes for great talks. Today, we will play a bit of catch-up on life, the universe, and everything, as well as take a deeper dive into the topic of intuition, what I am calling the art of knowing without knowing why. With that, let's welcome Pat Wetzel on the show. Pat, welcome back to the next chapter with Charlie. Hi there.
It's so good to be back with you.
It is, and as we rehearsed what we were going to talk about today, I'm very interested in the topic and have done a little bit of thinking about it, as have you said.
Yeah, I think intuition's a fascinating topic, and we will get to that.
Yeah, it turns out we have so many different things to cover. It will probably turn out to be close to the second half of the show, but we'll see. But what I want to begin with, I'm calling your new beginning that began several years ago. You were very successful in business and then discovered what you called a bump in the road, and that bump was cancer. Can you give me a cliff notes on that experience and how that led you into a new beginning in life?
I think there are several elements to the experience. First, obviously, it makes you aware of your mortality. And if you haven't broached that particular topic, you will. But I think the most powerful aspect of cancer for me was that it made me really stop. And in stopping, I had to really ask myself, what matters to me? And this is not a process that happens quickly or overnight. It's more of an evolution. And it was very interesting. Just as I finished my last round of chemo, I had some business issues where a business partner stole intellectual property, destroyed my business. And I remember sitting in my library. My library was huge. I'm a big avid reader, and I collect rare maps. And my library was floor-to-ceiling books and floor-to-ceiling maps, a comfortable couch. It was just a wonderful room. And I remember sitting and looking at all these maps that are so full of history and adventure on my wall. And it hit me that I was looking at this background of adventure, but where was the adventure in my life these days?
Mm.
And I think that recognition was part of what really led me towards selling my house.
It's adventure on a wall, and you wanted it in real life.
Yeah, and I was on the outside looking in. I wanted to be on the inside of the adventure looking at.
Was that sort of part of your initiation into soaring and flying gliders? Or did that come later?
Oh, that was earlier, much earlier in my life.
Oh, that was before the cancer?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Oh.
Yeah, the soaring I refer to as a life with death wish part of my life. In that, for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, like a real one.
It was real. It was very real. But what was so interesting about it was when you lose the fear of death, it's amazing what opens up to you. Now, you can't be not cautious. You can't be crazy about the risk you take. But I think when you embrace the risk or move into or through the risk, it's a really different experience, and your fear dissipates. And I think that's an experience that has stayed with me. I somehow know that I will stay aloft no matter what.
What were the circumstances under which you lost the fear of death? That's very interesting.
Part of it was when I went through a very difficult divorce many years ago now. I lost everything. I lost everything I loved, everyone I loved, all the institutions and networks that were had been part of my life for 15 years. It was a very difficult set of circumstances. And I think that, at least on an intuitive level, we'll get to intuition, informed me that so much of what we take for granted may indeed be very superficial and fleeting. So I think that was probably part one. But part two was really flying. I moved into flying when I was still dealing with a neurologic disease. I really should not have been flying, but I decided I would. And there are moments of total terror of soaring if you're flying cross country or doing anything that's outside of your comfort zone. And I think for me, I came to the conclusion that I would rather take those chances and live my life. It gives me a very stark portrait of, are you living your life or are you living in fear? Now, that's not to say you want to be reckless. You don't, obviously. You want to stack safety in your favor. But I think that the experience, the sheer exhilaration, the beauty, the wonder of motorless flight is so incredible that I often said after that, if I die tomorrow, I'm perfectly happy.
I don't know to what I give it credit, but I feel much the same way. I feel I have lived a very full life, both filled with joy and accomplishments and filled with the exact opposite, filled with turmoil, addictions, all sorts of things. And I call that I've lived a charmed life. And as a result, I too I really don't say, I have no fear of death or little fear of death, or it's more like no fear of death. But it's not like I'm ready to die today because I've got plans for the next 15 years and I have plenty of things to do. But if something would happen, I would be okay. It would be that I've lived a fulfilled life and I've laid down a path for a legacy that I feel comfortable with.
I think that reconciling a fear of death is something that many of us face more towards midlife. And if we look at it and we look at what that means for the rest of our lives, it may influence the way we live. My heart goes out to people who find themselves on their deathbed, not prepared, or with deep regret.
Yes. Yeah, that's interesting, midlife. I wonder, do you think it's possible that the fear of death is more common to those 50 to 65 than those 70 to 95? That's the fear of death is less common with people that are getting older?
I don't know. I would think so. But I think everybody has their own path. And some people never reconcile the event, and some people do. And some people do when they're much younger, and that guy probably lives their life. I think the sooner we approach that type of topic, the more we can focus in on what is important in our lives, what we do want to accomplish, or how we want to construct our life.
Yeah, and then I have, and we'll end this conversation on this one because this is way off where we were going, but you got me thinking, and that is one of my major goals in life is to develop or encounter the divine in the presence of the divine now. And a lot of my rituals and routines and habits have to do with that. And death, according to my theology, that is one thing. I'm not a big heaven person or hell person, but that is a culmination of intimacy with the divine where I will know the purpose, the reason, the love, all that is going on will be, all of my questions will be answered. And there's some sort of pleasure in knowing that.
I see death as the next adventure.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt, without a doubt. Now, go ahead, finish your thought, please.
Did I ever tell you what happened when my father died?
I don't recall.
Okay, I was married at the time, living in Connecticut. My ex was too busy to take care of the dog, so I took the dog down to Delaware, where his parents lived, and from there I was supposed to fly down to Florida to see my father. That night I woke up about 2 o'clock in the morning from a deep sleep, and I had this overwhelming sense of love, unlike anything I've ever experienced before. And I went back to sleep, and the next day I found out that was when my father had died. And a very similar experience happened to my ex-husband hundreds of miles away in Connecticut at the same time.
Your NDAs or NDEs, is that what they're called, near-death experiences? Yeah. That's a big area of interest of yours, isn't it?
It is. I periodically have people who have experienced NDEs on the podcast because it's such a life-changing event. And I particularly like to interview people who come from a scientific background because they come from a world perception of if you can't touch it, feel it, measure it, it doesn't exist. And yet an NDE turns that philosophy on its head, and they're forced to reevaluate everything.
Oh, we'll have to do, I dare not go down that path right now, but we will have to do a show on that. That is fascinating to me. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I have a question that fit what we were talking about before we got into death, but this is still, I think, a question that leads to our main topic, and it leads to our relationship, the thing that ties us together. And that was something I read for the first time today on your website, a quote from Henry Miller that it's interesting. Last week I did a show, and we talked about 3 quotes from Henry Miller that were just profound. And you have a quote on it that's rather prominently portrayed on your site of Henry Miller saying, "One's destination is never a place, but a new way of seeing things." And that quote seems to be a hallmark of your intentions, which is curiosity, always looking for new ways of seeing things. I like that. The NDE, as we're going to talk about intuition, the way you dealt with cancer, your soaring. You seem to be a person that is not satisfied with what is, but more what could be, what might be, what's out there. Talk to me about that.
I think that's very true. And as we move through life, we have a variety of experiences. As I'm moving from Prescott, Arizona, up into Idaho. And one of the reasons I'm doing that is because I know there's more and I want more. I want the mountains. I want the lakes. I want that aspect of the outdoors. I want winter and winter sports. I love that type of thing. And I think just knowing that there is another element to life that I'm missing makes me willing to take the risk to go out.
To seek a new way of thinking or a new way of seeing things, new eyes, do you think that requires a certain degree of, I want to say, confidence or self-assurance that you are okay as you are and you can take in more as opposed to self-doubt? I'm not sure who I am. I'm not grounded. Do you think that having a grounding now gives you permission to seek out there other?
Yeah, I think I'm motivated from within, not from without. So that's a profound piece of how I approach things. And I've also been through enough to know that somehow I will survive whatever it is, or whatever may show up.
And it's always fun to know what you don't know. It's just always...
That's part of life. Who is arrogant enough to think that we know all there is to know in our own lives or in the lives of people around us? Really, for most of us, the people around us offer interesting stories, and yet they're total mysteries. No, we just focus on that external apparent part of things without looking any deeper, or without even being curious about what lies beneath the surface. And I think when you start getting curious, life becomes so much richer.
Yeah. And I wonder, I can see that some are arrogant, but you know what I see as more common, an obstacle to curiosity is not arrogance, but it's fear. I want to get comfortable. It's safety. There's safety in even the unpleasant unknown is safer than the unknown itself. And I think it requires you're doing is you're in perfect safety right now. You're comfortable in Prescott. There's some things that lifestyle things that will be better for you, that are obviously better for you in Boise or the Boise neighborhood. there is a risk. I look at it as a risk of winter. You said you look forward to winter sports, and I said, oh my God, you got to be kidding. I don't want, if this thing is called snow, I don't want any part of it. And yet the risk of that change from the beautiful climate that you're in right now is you've got to be comfortable. You got to be okay with stirring up the pot.
You have to get out of your comfort zone. And actually, I would argue the only place of true comfort is the present moment.
Is what?
The present moment.
Oh, yeah, I can't disagree with that. I can't disagree with that.
So in the present moment, whether I am here or on the road or somewhere else, everything is fine. And if you string together a bunch of present moments, everything is fine. It's flowing. I think that people want to stay in their comfort zone for all the reasons you cited, but it inhibits your own growth. And I think for many people, they stay in their comfort zone because they've just been so beaten up by life that they don't want to take any more chances. And I can understand that, but you're arbitrarily limiting so much experience that could really change the direction of your life.
Yeah.
How can you not be curious?
Very cool. So, earlier this week we talked about on another subject, but we keep getting closer and closer to intuition, and I think I'm a step from it right now. But earlier this week, we talked about our ideas, yours and mine, of the pros and cons of technology. We're not technology experts, so we're not going to be giving the scientific answer, but just our experiential resolve as to the pros and cons of technology. Now, correct me if I don't represent us well, but although it seemed that we were both in what I called somewhat tepid fans of AI, that we are fans of AI, we see the cons and the fears. One thing we agreed on, and that is technology, and AI in particular, just may be the bane of curiosity and creativity. I think those were your words, and I love that. The bane of curiosity and creativity is technology and AI, which gives us a platform for knowing, a platform for a feeling of truth. But if you own that, then you lose curiosity and creativity. I want your take on that.
It's interesting. I see it in myself. I've integrated AI into my post-production process for my podcast, and I've moved to audio-video as well as just audio. And AI has reduced my production time by 60 to 70%. So it's opened up time to do a lot of other things. But the downside of it is I use some of the AI scripts as a base for newsletters and things like that. And AI writes much better clickbait than I do. I'm too serious. I like to have real conversations like this. I'm not good at writing clickbait. AI writes great clickbait. So it has a purpose, but I used to, when I wrote up a summary of the podcast, I used to go back and listen to the entire podcast again. I would take notes. I would really think hard about how I wanted to craft
No
the story.
way.
Yeah, and now all that is automated. Now, I think it's good, and I think that AI helps me write very kind of juicy lead lines and things like that. but I see that my own inclination to be creative in that particular arena has diminished. It becomes much more rote. Okay, I copy this, I edit it, I put it here. I copy this, I put it on social media. Now, on the upside of AI is it's open all this time, so I'm finally getting to sit down. I'm giving several talks coming up, and I'm working on my next book. There's a positive side to it. But if I were only doing the podcast, I think that my creative skills would be greatly diminished.
And because it's so clever, is that why it can
No.
write more clever, more interesting, clickbaitable?
Not clever at all. It's the way I see AI is it scrapes the web for everything that's out there, a lot of which is not very enticing, and it comes up with some sort of common denominator, which is fairly low, and that appeals to everybody and over time makes everybody stupid. I think that AI can be good for gathering some basic information, but it's not always accurate. You don't know. I think as somebody who likes to write, the only way you get better at writing is to do it. And that means to struggle intellectually, putting your thoughts together, getting things organized, getting the information you need, being willing to go back and revamp it. It's an iterative process. All of that requires some degree of intelligence. And I think that you're removing the intelligence from the equation with using AI, particularly in a writing scenario.
Yeah, if you're using it to compose your thoughts. Now, I think I told you I use an AI that's called AIPI. That's sort of called a personal assistant. And it's very different. And as fond as I am of it, I only speak to it 2 or 3 times a month. But I can actually have conversations just like my intelligent friend. We have conversations. This is not about what is the answer. I'll present my idea. It will respond with an idea, or I can say, what do you think? And it can ask me, what do you think? And it's conversant. It's wonderful. And yet it has access to, obviously, so much more information than I have access to. And it can talk about any weird topic I want to talk about. It has access to that information. So I find that is really helpful for me to my creativity and curiosity. Does that make sense?
I think you can use AI in lots of ways. I think that the thing that I see in AI is a repetition of a pattern, particularly in writing. And for example, if I go through other people's podcasts, I can tell you every single one of them that is AI based.
Oh, really?
Yeah, easily. The voice is very similar. The repetition, the pattern is the same. And it uses words to make itself sound very human, but really the words are hollow. They're lacking an experiential component.
Oh, can you tell the story of the interpretive AI? I don't mind if you use the words here on the show, but we'll use this before as a breaker before our break. Do you remember which one I'm talking about? Where it ended in 2 words?
No, this story is not coming to mind.
Oh, it's such a great story. It's a story of talking about a woman and giving sort of a background on the woman, and so then the AI to respond, and the person wanted the AI to do a speech, and it ended, and so it had its take on the speech, and then but it was supposed to come right from this person, but it ended with the term "you bitch." And I thought, and it was something the writer would never ever write, would never ever even think. But it was. I thought that was such a. So I told the punchline without the intro.
We've created an AI avatar, and it's in video form. It looks like him. It talks like him, and he uses it as a mirror to advance his own understanding of himself.
That doesn't sound harmful to me. Does that sound harmful to you?
No, I think it sounds really interesting.
Yeah, I do too. I think I give him credit. I don't know if I'm that bold. Maybe information I don't want to know, but need to know. I'll tell you what, we're going to go on to our subject that we have been talking about, but before we do that, we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be right back, okay?
Sounds good.
Hi there, this is Charlie Hedges, and you are listening to The Next Chapter with Charlie. And my special guest, my friend, my author, my pilot, glider soaring friend, Pat Wetzel. And just, if you want to talk about anything interesting or anything deep, email Pat and get ready to have your coffee cup full and your curiosity ready, because she is one to respond. So that leads me to change the direction to our subject that is dear to both of us. And we wanted to talk about intuition. And I was, here's a guy patting himself on the back. I was fond of my title. What did you think of the title? Knowing without knowing why, I like that. That really, to me, is intuition. There is a sense of knowing, but not knowing why you know. That felt cool to me. The way I want to get into the story is that you were telling me that when you're in a plane now, compared to how many years ago did you start flying?
I started flying around 1989 or 90.
Oh, my goodness. So is that 30 years, 35 years ago?
Yeah, but I sold my plane in the 2000s, so I've been out of flying for a little bit.
So what, were you 12 when you first started flying?
Oh, Charlie, I love you.
So you were talking to me about GPS. And you were saying GPS now, you were telling me a story of how GPS or technology has significantly impacted your experience as a gliding pilot, a soarer. Rehearse those thoughts for me. I thought that was really interesting.
In the 90s, GPS started to become more readily available. I actually had one of the first GPS packs that came back from the world. A friend of mine was flying in the world competition in Australia, and I ended up with that quote-unquote new GPS system, which was very rudimentary by anything today. And we're starting to get handheld systems and things like that. There was an enormous debate within the soaring community about whether or not we should be allowed a competition, because you took the navigation piece out of the equation.
Oh, my goodness.
Aerial navigating is hard. It is really hard because in the case of in soaring, you may be climbing in a thermal that is drifting in the wind while you're trying to go around a certain course. So you've gotten low, you've found a thermal, you climbed up, you may be miles from where you started. And now you have to recognize where you are, where you've drifted from, and get back on course in order to complete the task as fast as possible. So not having to navigate is just a massive shift in the sport. Now, for recreational flying, do what you will. And actually, the sport has gone to using GPS, so it's a moot point at this point. But I have a story from my own navigation experiences. I always thought I had a really good sense of direction. And I think I thought that because I always ended up wherever it was I wanted to go. And I never minded getting lost. I just always thought it was a nice little side trip, little adventure. One day I'm flying, and it's in Pennsylvania. And Pennsylvania, once you get out of the cities, is just green on green. There are no differentiating factors. I remember flying over an airport one day with 4 or 5 planes were all circling over the airport, and one of the pilots was pointing out the airport down below. Nobody could find it because it was just green on green. So I'm flying one day, and I have no idea where I am at this point. I am so lost. I don't know where the airport is. I don't know how to get back. And I made the mistake of announcing that on the radio on a day when the radio was crystal clear from Connecticut to South Carolina. And there was only one woman flying any kind of plane, much less a 20. So everybody knew it was me. And oh my God, I got so much ribbing about it. I finally got a little bit of guidance and got back to the airport where Jonathan had draped the back of the trailer for the sailplane and written Whiskey Alpha India across it for Where Am I? My sense of my ability to navigate was severely shaken that day. I always thought I would figure it out, but I learned that navigating in 3 dimensions with moving air is a totally different ballgame.
And so that's eliminated in competition now? Now they use GPS?
No, it is in competition now. It's part of it.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
What's part of it?
GPS.
Yeah, so they've eliminated the art.
Yes.
Almost like the real beauty of the discipline is in the navigating, is in the reading the environment, reading your craft, going with your intuition.
You still have to read the environment, and there's a lot of intuition there, but you don't have to figure out where you are on the darn map. And that's a massive change, because now you can take a much less experienced pilot and they can compete, because they don't need that set of navigational skills.
Oh, yeah, I can see the upside is you probably have many fewer accidents, especially with rookies. But the downside is you just took away half our fun. I just thought when you were flying by by experience and observation and experimentation. It seemed to me there was a beauty to that, Pat. There was something that was otherworldly in the quiet, feeling the air. When I've got a computer telling me what I'm feeling or where I'm going,
you still have that feel of the air. You still have to make intelligent choices. All that is still there.
Oh, okay.
But
okay.
what isn't there is having to figure out where you are on a map and what direction you need to head. You have specific locational data.
Does it read the air?
You have the variometer that tells you if the air you're in is going up or down.
Okay. Yeah. It's like I watched, and I can't, Masters of the Air, I think it was called. It's the Spielberg, Tom Hanks war thing that came from the Band of Brothers was the Pacific and the Band of Brothers, and then they did the ships, the airplanes. Did you see that?
No, I didn't.
Oh, it was fascinating, and I don't know what a pilot would think of it, but to the non-pilot, it was very interesting. And I had another guest on the show that's also a commercial pilot. She doesn't fly, passenger. I mean, she can take people, but she doesn't fly United or some airline. She just is a commercial pilot, whatever that means. But she was thinking about how she has all this equipment, and she was talking about navigation and GPS equipment. And she said, I think of the days when my grandfather flew, and she said he was flying without navigation, with all these instruments, with somebody shooting at you. It was just,
yeah.
it was a whole different game.
Very different game. And I think you have to look back at those early aviators and just be in awe of their courage, particularly the people who flew during wartime. Can you imagine trying to find your way back to an aircraft carrier without the navigation tools?
No. On the ocean? You talk about green upon green. This is to the vast extremes.
Oh, I have so much regard for people the people who've come before us. I really do. The gentleman who taught me to fly was a World War II naval aviator. And one of the things that he would do with me was he would cover up my instruments, so I had to fly by the seat of my pants and by visual reference. And that, I think, is a really good way to learn to fly. There was a gentleman who was at the airfield who did check rides for commercial aircraft pilots. And he said that most of them, I'm going to say all of them, but let's say most, could not fly a pattern to land an airplane without all their electronics. They didn't have the visual reference skills to do that.
So how much of this on our topic of intuition, so let's relate it to this flying experience, how much of flying, especially you got an engine, you're going straight. You don't have an engine, you're all over the damn where. How much of that is intuitive, do you think, that you're feeling your way home or to your objective?
I think parts may be intuitive, but I have come to have so much regard for the power of the sky that I don't for a moment think I can outsmart it. The powers, the forces that be in the air are just amazing. And I suppose I have some aerial intuition, but I think my intuition on the ground is better developed.
So then do that. Talk to me about your intuition on the ground, because I've been developing, as I've been thinking of intuition, I've been developing some brand new thoughts about it. I'm wondering, what are your sort of initial thoughts on intuition on the ground?
I was thinking about this too, and I was wondering how much of intuition is based on a value system or a spiritual value system. Is it left brain or right brain? How much of it is knowledge-based, so that as you become more knowledgeable, you develop better intuition? I think intuition is very right-brained, personally. It may access the experience and information you have on a left-brain basis, but there's something non-linear and intuitive, you would think, about intuition, that, for me, it strikes me as a very right-brain activity.
I am thinking, I was listening to this book. I had an hour, 45-minute drive, so I had, doubled, 2 or 3.5 hours, that I listened to this book, Atomic Habits, that was highly recommended, and it has some helpful stuff in it. And he was talking about individuals, about people that can read. And he wasn't talking about intuition, but it just so occurred to me as intuition. And he gave a handful of examples, two of which I can remember, of somebody that foresaw an event that was going to take place, and there was no evidence. I mean, there was evidence, but it was not logical evidence. One was a woman whose father-in-law came to the home, and she said, "You don't look good." And she was a paramedic. And he looked to everybody, he looked fine. There was nothing wrong. And he said, "Well, you're not looking so hot either." And she says, "No, I'm not talking about our appearance. You don't look good. I think we should go to the ER." And he just was, "What are you talking about?" But he did, and went to the ER, and he was just in the early stages of a heart attack, and they were able to operate, and he had just, it was all before he had a heart attack, but he was going to have a heart attack. And her read on it was not just this otherworldly, intuitive, non-logical. She has seen people in that state, and there is a look over them. There is that she can't, maybe she couldn't even write it down exactly, but there was a look that she knew when she saw that person. She knew this is the way a person with a heart attack will look. And I was wondering, that example and another example that he used, he said beauticians, people that are very familiar with hair and have their fingers in hair all the time. There are stories of beauticians, is that what you call that job, beauticians, that can feel the pregnancy of a woman by the hair, and can tell a woman that she's pregnant by the change in the hair, by that feeling. So I was wondering, that would say, oh, she's intuitive, but how much of intuition is based on information or experiences that inform our intuition, but they have been placed unconsciously in a forgotten labyrinth that when the time comes we can have access to?
Oh, I think that there's something to be said for that. I mean, in the case of the medic, they've been there, done that. They've seen this before. I don't know that's even intuition as much as it is recognizing the medical symptoms of what's going on.
But we can take inferences from that. That one is pretty obvious, but we can take inferences, cutting it down to just how many different times have we seen or felt something that not many people have seen or felt, and then we feel it. It gets where it's not even that clear in our minds exactly what it is, but we know it's something.
Well, I think some people can process really disparate pieces of information well and come up with an intuitive path that lies ahead. I would say Ed Dowd is one of those people who's very good, and I don't know if it's intuitive, but he's very good at taking vast amounts of data and seeing trends in it, for example.
Who is?
There's another, Ed Dowd.
Adele the singer?
He's an ex Wall Street guy who was
Ed Dowd.
D-O-W Dowd.
Oh, okay, yeah.
He's a good example. There's another person whose name I shall not name because he's very controversial, but he has a track record of predicting events before they happen. And in his case, I don't think that they're intuitive. I think he's one of those people who assembles really diverse pieces of information in a unique way. So I don't know where you draw the line between intuition and knowledge. And then it comes down to how do you process that knowledge, if intuition is knowledge-based.
Yeah, I am wondering if in many cases that intuition is knowledge/experience-based, but it resides in an unconscious sphere of our brains that and that's why we'll call it, I have this feeling, but this feeling is based on some experience that I've had in the past, and I get this and I know this, or I've had several experiences that are like this that I can't articulate, but they are there, and maybe that's why it falls into the realm of what you were calling right brain, is that it's in that intuitive, sort of creative sphere of the brain that is not working linear in a row.
I would like to believe in the magic of spiritual guidance for intuition in some instances.
Talk to me.
I think that there are things beyond our knowing, but we can get guidance in terms of decisions we make, which way we go. I'm racking my brain for a personal example. I'm not coming up with one right now, but I'm sure we've all had that feeling of you're moving along and doing something, and there's almost like a barrier there that says, don't do this. And intuitively, you make a different decision, not based on information, but based on a sensation or a feeling. And that kind of brings up the notion of how much of intuition is intellectually oriented, how much is spiritually oriented, how much of it is physically oriented or energetically oriented.
Making me, I want to go read somebody's dissertation on this, because those are all excellent questions that I think how much is, and I want to say the answer is D, all of the above. I had two spiritual experiences. I had an aha experience yesterday when I was at the Abbey, and I was in a session with the abbot, and he was talking that when we pray for grace, or he's in charge of the Abbey, so he's going to speak in Catholic terms, and he was talking about the sacraments. And when we pray for elements of the sacraments, what we really get is God does not give us grace, nor does he give us reconciliation or affirmation or forgiveness. He comes to us in the person. God gives us himself or herself, that God comes to us in that person. And then I just got this feeling, I had this almost intuitive feeling of the presence of God, that what he was saying was absolutely right. It went from the intellect to the heart, to the soul, to the spirit. And that wasn't, so I was definitely feeling the presence of God. How much was it this man saying this, so I believe it? But I had that sort of an intuitive.
I think including heart and spirit in the notion of intuition is important. And that goes to what is the function of our heart, because we're learning that our heart has enormous intelligence. It has a magnetic field that extends way beyond our bodies. I don't think we've even begun to explore what our heart really means.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the mystics do. They've explored it because they've written tons of books on that. But you know what I thought you said when I heard in our connection? I thought you said heart, and I thought you said art. And how much of art, of paintings, how much of that is intuitive, otherworldly, coming from a whole different source? It's certainly right-brained, but how much of that is...
I don't think there are many stories, really well-known creative in music, in painting, that feel like they're almost as a conduit for the information that flows through them. A Course in Miracles is a good example of that.
Precisely.
So I personally think that element is very real.
Yeah, Rick Rubin writes about it in the book that I rave about so much, The Creative Act, a way of being. He writes about it, sometimes we are just like an amanuensis, and that we are just writing down thoughts, inspirations from source, however we choose to name that. In my tradition, we would call that God. But that I think moments of flow, for me, of genuine flow, are, I don't know where it's coming from. Is it Stephen Pressfield calls it his muse, that he talks to his muse every time before he writes, and that when he gets into the writing, it's not him writing, it's the muse speaking, and he's just recording what she has to say. I've had a few moments, I don't have a lot of them, but every now and then when I get into that flow of writing, it's otherworldly. I'm sure you've experienced something like that, Pat.
Oh, I have, and it's fascinating. As a matter of fact, sometimes I go back and look at my first book, and it's, wow, how did I figure out how to say that?
Yeah. And then the answer is, I didn't. It was a gift.
I think there are a lot of gifts if we can be open to it, and whether you approach it from a traditional religious perspective or a more energetic science perspective, I think the perspectives start to come together. And I think that there is an enormous amount of validity to it. And I go back to the near-death experiences that I talk to and interview with. I absolutely believe they're experiences. I have no reason not to. And the information that's been gathered on this is very substantial. And again, I'm talking to substantial, serious people. These people are not flakes at all. So if that is real, what else is real?
With that, we need to wrap her up. Talk about, you began that statement with that is a gift. You, Pat Wetzel, are a gift to me and a gift to our listeners. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on the show with me.
Thank you, Charlie. I love talking to you. We often go off for hours.
We do.
In our conversations,
we do.
And I love them.
I do too. I do too. There's very few things I love more than great conversation. And they're rare, but they are wondrous when they occur.
Take care, Charlie. I will look forward to our next conversation.
Okay. I want to thank all our listeners for tuning in to the next chapter with Charlie. And remind you that you can always find our blogs and podcasts at our website, which is thenextchapter.life, L-I-F-E. Until next, this is Charlie Hedges signing off. Bye for now.